Today's tip isn't necessarily trumpet related, but it's definitely like performance related and music related, and that's in dealing with performance anxiety. Performance anxiety is something that I've dealt with pretty much my entire life. Um, Even before I think I even necessarily knew it was a thing, like I wasn't aware of it. I'd never heard of stage fright or anything. But I remember in sixth grade, I had a solo on green sleeves, and I remember just being kind of nervous. It had an E flat, what at the time was a high E flat in the top space because I started band in sixth grade, and like I most times couldn't get that E flat, and just remember being like kind of nervous about it. But then became more cognizant as like I remember going into like eighth grade, ninth grade, auditioning for honor bands, and just noticing that during the audition, like that my mouth would be void of any moisture, and that my hands would just shake and tremble to the point where at the very least it sounded like an out of control vibrato, but it would get really bad. I'd have a hard time just keeping the mouthpiece on my face, like shaking that much. And that honestly continued kind of like all my life. And especially if anywhere I had to play solo, and it's still a thing I can be challenged and struggle with is that. And so I kind of wanted to share that because misery loves company, but also offer some tips of things that I've found that have helped me. Okay. And some of these might be controversial, but they really shouldn't be, and it's fine. So anyway, let's get into it. First thing is mindset. So the first thing that's helped me is to recognize that really the outcome of whatever I'm playing for generally just doesn't matter. If I'm just playing for an audience, it shocks me how little the audience knows about music and how they really can almost never tell the difference between world-class musicianship and abject horror and terrible playing. I don't know why they can't tell, but they generally just can't tell, which that's sometimes frustrating, and that's its own thing, I guess. But just recognizing this isn't that important. So in your mind, don't build it up as like, oh my gosh, this audition, this performance, this is so important. I want to do so well, blah, blah, blah. The more you do that, the more pressure you're putting on yourself, the more anxiety you're creating for yourself. So just don't do that. It's a performance. You're playing music. Life goes on regardless of what happens. It doesn't matter. So next. So that's my first tip. Second, I think the other thing that I always struggled with was that playing the trumpet was the first thing that I'd ever had done well. And honestly, probably one of the only things that I've done particularly well. I mean, I've been good at running business and stuff like that. But trumpet was the first thing, and it was the first thing that I ever remember hearing people say, oh, he's a good trumpet player. And so therefore, like, my identity just got really wrapped up into it. And so I would feel like I need to always live up to other people's expectations of me, that being a good trumpet player. And those pressures would just add on to it. And so I've learned to just accept, like, whatever this performance is, it doesn't say anything about me as a person or really even a trumpet player. And I've had enough opportunities as a professional or semi-professional, I should say, to play with other players that sometimes great players, like, they sometimes bite the dust too. Like, it just happens. And, if it can happen to the best, then it can definitely happen to me. And, just to not stress it. Another tip that I can give is just something that Adam Rappa says, and I'm going to clean it up. Not because I personally don't mind cussing whatsoever, but on this channel because I'm trying to make sure it's accessible for all ages. I will not engage in colorful language. But when it's showtime, when you're ready it's time to play. You're either getting ready to record or you're getting ready to play a concert performance, whatever. Regardless of how you're feeling, like, his suggestion was just take a big breath and just say, screw it, like, and just go. Of course, he said something else. But, like, it's just, hey, whatever it is, it's going to be it. It, like, doesn't matter. Let her rip, tater chip. Like, it just, that's kind of the mindset you got to have. Like, and you will see what happens when it happens. And, like, it just doesn't matter, So I think just sort of that kind of carefree of, like, here goes nothing. Like, that kind of mindset, I think, is very liberating. Another tip for you is rather than listening to what's coming out the end of your bell, listen to the perfect trumpet that's happening in your head. And that's something that is a learned skill that has taken me a long time, and I still struggle with, but I still try to adapt. That when I'm playing, rather than listening to myself, I'm trying to only focus on what I'm hearing in my head for this performance. And I'm almost oblivious to what's coming out of the bell. I think that's probably some of the best piece of advice you can possibly get is to do that. That came from Dizzy Gillespie. He said that like when he's making music, the sound in his head is so loud he can hardly hear anything else. And I think that's something we should strive for as well. And then the final thing, if none of these other things are quite cutting it for you, then I think there is nothing wrong in looking into medication. Over the years, I'd taken, and most common for this is some type of beta blocker, like a metoprolol, something like that. Your doctor could prescribe this, and in some countries you can get this over the counter. But I remember years ago, I won an opportunity to play with our university orchestra in a concerto competition. I remember being so terrified, and someone that I knew over the internet sent me beta blockers from Mexico, and he suggested, take one of these during rehearsal just to make sure there's no adverse effects. But otherwise, like, if you're good, you should be good. And I remember like that being the first time I ever had a solo in a public performance that I wasn't just like crap my pants terrified. And then last year I had an event coming up that honestly was giving me a lot of anxiety. And I'm not really one who's like ridden with anxiety, but just this like I can be. And I was like really, really not looking forward to this performance. And I remember going to my doctor and I asked, hey, could I get a prescription for beta blockers? I've got this performance and stuff like that. And he was like, well, actually, like looking at your recent heart rates and stuff, I'd kind of like for you to be on a daily beta blocker. And so I take just a small one of those every day. And I've noticed what a difference that makes, not only in my just general like attitude throughout the day, because it keeps my heart rate under control, which is basically what a beta blocker does. It keeps your heart rate from like kind of accelerating. I've noticed like I just am more even keel throughout the day, but I've definitely noticed that when I'm performing solos and stuff like that, I don't have the nervousness that I normally would have. Even in like a rehearsal or something like that, I would get nervous if I had to play a solo. And now I get like a little bit of that anxious energy, but it's not like debilitating. So that might be something worth looking into as well. If you've tried all these other tips, nothing else has happened. You've tried just kind of like, not making too big of a deal out of it. You've tried the Adam Rappa kind of just like here goes nothing kind of approach, and that doesn't do it. You've tried the Dizzy Gillespie, like I'm just gonna just listen to this perfect trumpet player in my head and just play along with that. That's not quite getting you there. If things are so bad that you've got total dry mouth and your hands are shaking, nothing else is happening, man, there is nothing wrong in getting a beta blocker, looking into some kind of performance anxiety medication to help with that. Like, that makes performing and playing music so much more fun and enjoyable again. It's something I wish I had done a long time ago. Would have made it so much better. So anyway, those are my tips. I hope that you find it helpful. If you've got things that you do for performance anxiety, share those in the comments. Thanks. Bye.